Hello everyone. Today I would like to tell you how to do a blanket or a scarf or table runner that you do not want the edges to curl on. And I always use a garter stitch border. So I'd like to go through some information about garter stitch borders and then show you how to do it. Okay, so the first thing I'd like to show you is some examples. This has a garter stitch side border and a garter stitch beginning, and there's also one at the other end. The way I like to do mine to get these the same size, you can kind of see that that's a little over an inch, and this side one is also a little over an inch. And in order to do that, this is what I've come up with. I use 1 peg for turning and 4 pegs on each side as the border. That's the sides. Now, in order to get this bottom to be the same size, you just double how many pegs you're using on the side for the border. You don't count the one you're using as a turning peg. The turning peg is just there to give you this nice, beautiful chain stitch all the way down your blanket. It's not even really adding much width to your blanket, just a little bit of stitch, an 1/8 of an inch. But if you don't do the right amount of rows here, then this will be maybe real fat and this would be real skinny. So I always do 4, and I double that 4 and make 8. So this is 8 rows. It's 4 garter ridges. There's 4 garter ridges here. If you do 1 turning peg and 5 pegs as your border, you would double the 5 and make 10 beginning and ending rows. And 10 beginning and ending rows would be 5 ridges. Now on this table runner, I only did 3. I did 3 pegs on each side. And so I only went with 6 rows, which is 3 garter ridges. And you can see the garter ridge is really good on this one. So there's 3, and you can also see, once again, that that's about an inch, and the pegs on the side are about an inch. So you want the borders to be symmetrical. You don't want one to be real fat and one to be real thin. And I in no way, this is the smallest I ever go, is 3 pegs on the end and 1 for turning. That would be 4 total. And I do that because with this not being very wide, I didn't want to have real wide borders. But there again, if you go too small, these may turn in like this when you're using it. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but if you don't want a lot of curl on your big blanket, or a big blanket should have a little bit more than just 3. I found that 4 actually is a tremendous, it works for every weight of yarn I've tried it on. When I first started, my borders were not symmetrical. They were real big on one end, not as wide on the sides. I didn't like that look, so I was just making samples till I got it the way I wanted. Okay, so let's go over here to the loom. Excuse the movement of the camera for a second. And I want to get started showing you how to do this. It's just going to be E-wrap. A lot of people just like to do E-wrap blankets, and I love them too because you don't have to, there's no thinking involved. It's very easy. It makes a beautiful blanket. So anyway, this is my pattern I'm going to use. I'm going to have 8 rows. That's 4 garter ridges because I'm using 4 pegs on each side for borders. Then this is all E-wrap middle. So all these rows will be E-wrap, except for the borders. On my paper, I put a red K or P. The K or P tells me what stitch am I going to use for the border on this row. Okay, and it alternates. One time you knit, one time you purl. So that creates the garter stitch along your border. Then when you make your blanket as long as you want to, for this sample, I'm only going to do 24 rows. But once you get your blanket as long as you want to, you just do another 8 rows at the very end. That gives you the ending garter stitch. All right, so the first thing I'm going to show you is how to set up your loom. Okay, don't mind all my strings here. I have some samples already made to save us some time. This is my starter peg. I make this purple because that's my turning peg. And this one over here is purple. Then I have my 4 border pegs on each side, and I made them green. You can use whatever colors you want. I'm using a pink yarn, so I always try to use something that's not similar to my yarn so that I do have the chance to see them better. Okay, then I'm just using 8 pegs of E-wrap in the center. All right, this is what we're hoping to get to. I can't really show you very well, but here's a little sample. It's going to have the E-wrap border and the E-wrap middle. I mean the garter border and the E-wrap middle, and we will get to that. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you how to cast on the best way for your blanket. Just going to sit these are the stitch markers I use in case I forgot to tell you. They're silicone. You can use anything you want. This is just a personal preference. I got some of these from Knitting Board and some are from Amazon. They're silicone. They're kind of stretchy. Also, they snip really well if you happen to sew one in or loom one in to your project, which I have done. You can easily take a pair of scissors and just snip it out of your project, and there will be no problem. So I have a couple different colors, and that's what I like to use. They usually don't get in my way. When I first started using them, I did loom knit one in, but not since then. Okay, so now to cast on, I like to use the chain cast on. Not everyone has these Cindy Woods, so let me show you how to cast on if you do not have an anchor pin. If you make a slip knot, which any way that you make your slip knot, hang on a second. There we go. If you don't know how to make a slip knot, just tie it on there. Okay, so I just put it on the peg before I want to start. And then you would just make a loop like this and go behind your first peg and around. This hand here is just going to be tension on your yarn, and this hand's going to be holding this loop. It's a little loop. And you want your fingers inside this loop and just grab hold of that yarn and then pull it through. Tighten it up, snug it up, and go behind the next peg and do the same thing. Grab that yarn and snug it up. And the same thing with this one. Okay? Now, if you have a Cindy Wood loom, I highly suggest them. I love them. I recommend them to everyone. They're very nice. Okay? What I'm going to do with this is put this little tail under the anchor pin. It just clips right in there. This is easier when you're on your chair and not at the table where you're not used to looming. But anyway, that's how it's done. I want to move this one thing here so hopefully my loom doesn't bang on the table so much. Okay, so once again, you have your yarn under there. So take your yarn and just make a loop. Go around, put both sides of it around the first peg. And then bring it between those, like that. Grab hold. And just pull it, snug it up. You go behind with both strings, like that. So there's like 2 strings here. That's what I'm saying. Put both of them behind and forward. And then go in this hole and pick up that. And then just pull it tight. Or snug it up. Not real tight, but you want a nice snug there. You don't want your loops to be all loopy. So I'm going to do the same thing the whole way around. Believe me, you will get faster as you practice this. You can have your cast on done in no time, even on a big loom. Okay, and when you get down to where you only have one peg left, just take this loop you're holding and put it right over the peg. Now this step here usually isn't mentioned in the crochet cast on or the chain cast ons, but this is what I like to do to prevent any loose loops. So I highly recommend that you do this. You do that, put them all on, and then you do one row of U-knit on every peg, using every peg. Don't skip any. Do one row of U-knit the whole way across. I'm just half wrapping it. That's a U-knit, in case you weren't familiar with them. On every peg, all the way back to the first peg you put it on. And even the very first one. Okay, now I'm just going to push them down just a little bit. They don't need to go the whole way to the bottom. These are nice tall pegs that helps keep your stitches or loops from falling off. But you don't need to push them all the way down, or you can if that's what you prefer. Just let this in this clip until we do a row or two, and then we'll come back and take that off. Or your slip knot, you can take that off after a row or two. Okay, so the first row of our pattern was knit. So it's all knit. So what you have to do for your turning pegs is skip the first one, and you'll U-wrap the last one in each row. And I'll show you that. So the first thing we want to do is skip peg 1. And you're going to E-wrap all your pegs. Well, you can do them all if you want to. Or you can just do a couple like this and hold it. And then come back and take them off. This first row will be a little more snugger than your subsequent rows because of snugging that bind up, that cast on up. We had to snug it up so it makes the cast on a little bit tight, but that's what you want so you don't get loopy loops, loose loops, or whatever you want to call them. They're not pretty, so you want to try to prevent them. So after you get the first row, and especially the second row when we purl back, that will loosen up your tension. Okay, so you just want to do them all, but when you get to the very last one, I always do it this way and around, and then I hold it here in the front. It makes it easier. It's just U-wrap. It's kind of a U-wrap. It's not really, and I guess it could be an E-wrap, but it's going the opposite way. It's not going this way. It's going to the front, back, and the front. I call it a U-knit or a U-wrap, and then continue to knit off all your pegs. That's row 1. That's only half of a garter ridge. For a garter ridge, you need 2 rows. A knit row and a purl row makes a garter ridge. So that is just 1 row. The second row of our pattern, as you can see here. Now normally, okay, we just did all knits, so I'll check that off. Next row is all purls. Okay, now even though we're going in a different direction, we still want to skip the first peg and U-wrap the last peg. But this time, the directions are for purls. So hopefully you know how to purl. If not, I can try to give you a look here. Let me lift this up a little. Okay, for a purl, you put your point of your loom hook down, scoop this yarn up, make a loop. And then you want to take it off of the peg. Okay, back here's your stitch. And put that loop on the front and then pull it. And you just want to do that for every one. Pull it out. Use your needle if you want to help you get the stitch off. Then just lay that loop and pull it. Did you see that? Or you can take your fingers and pull it up like that and then lay your loop on. There's a couple different ways. Depends if you have sore arthritic hands like I do, you find ways that lets your hook try to help you out as much as possible. So I usually go down and I let the hook lift it up and then back down. Okay, so what we're doing is purling the whole way across that for row 2. My yarn split, that happens. It's easy to correct. When you get to the last one, again, it's a U-wrap. Okay, that is a garter ridge. Right here is your garter ridge. This big thing is 2 rows. It's 1 knit and 1 purl, but it makes a ridge. Okay, so you will continue to do that. You'll get your notepad and you'll check off your purl and you'll do another row knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl. Okay, so now I have the next part finished to save us some time. I'm not going to show you every little thing, but here is all 8 rows. It has 4 garter ridges. This is a garter ridge in between. So it's 1, 2, 3, and 4 right up to the loom. You can see 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's 8 rows, 4 garter ridges. Okay, and you should be back, after that, you should be back at your starting peg. And if you check, you're now going to go into where the whole middle is going to be E-wraps. So the only thing that's going to change is your knits and purls for your border, which are the green marked pegs. Okay, so the first row, it says K. What's really nice is if your pattern says K and K, that means the whole row is knits. There's nothing you really have to do different. It's like an easy row between a more difficult row with purls. So if it's a knit, border's a knit, and the middle's a knit, then all you have to do is skip the first peg and knit every peg. Okay, so I'll knit these off and then finish wrapping. I like to do, I never wrap the whole peg at a time, but usually for a blanket, that would be almost impossible. You know, I mix it up, sometimes 10, 8, 9, whatever. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you stop or start. They're all going to look the same. And when you get to the last one again, you just bring it to the front and around and to the front. If you want to do an E-wrap or a U-wrap in a different way, do it whatever way you want to, but do it the same, the whole blanket. Don't change in the middle. Start doing it one way and then do it another way. Okay, so that would be the knit, where you knit your border and you knit your middle, so you check off. Now you're going to purl your border and knit your middle. For me, I like to purl this way. It's easier for me to purl this way. So I always start my knitting here and go this way, and then when I come back, it's a purl. So all my blankets and everything that I do, I'm always doing my borders purls the same way. If you need help, you can put a piece of tape here on your loom and put purls go this way, so you always remember if you're over here, you're purling back. You're knitting over, you're purling back. Put a piece of paper, put a note on something that helps you. This is the way that I learned helped me the most, was putting it on my paper. So I know if I'm on this row, I'm purling and then knitting the middle, then purling the end. You have to figure that out, what makes it easier for you to remember, because if you mess up, it will show. And either you'll be ripping out or letting it go as with a mistake in it. Okay, so I'm going this way, so I'm purling. So you purl the first 4. You skip that first peg. Always skip the first peg in every row. So you can pull them off like that, or you can use your needle and help lift it off like that. Okay, then when you get to this part, it's knits. On my pattern at the top, it says all knits are E-wraps. So if you're using a pattern, make sure you know what the pattern designer is asking you to do. In this case, it's all E-wrap. E-wrap to there. Okay, so my middle's E-wrap. So you just knit them over. Okay, you're back to your green markers. That means you're back to your border and you're going this way, so that's purls. And also look at your pattern. The pattern for this row says that the borders are purls. So you'll purl the 4. Okay, then you wrap that last peg. Okay, the next one, I'll do 2 more just to give you a look here. The next one's all knits again. Your border's knits because you just purled. So this one's an easy. Skip the first one and E-wrap all the rest of your pegs. I hope I'm keeping it in camera for you. I'm doing the best that I can here. You'll E-wrap to the last one. There you'll U-wrap. Go around the back and to the front. It just makes it easier for me to hold it to bring it back to the front. You don't have to. You can just knit it whatever way makes it work for you. Okay. And once more, the next row, we just knitted everything, so now we have to purl these first 4. Skip that first one like you always do. Don't forget to skip the first one in every row. That gives you that nice chain border edging. Okay, so there's your purls. Okay, now you're in the middle here is E-wrap. Doesn't matter if this is 8 pegs or 100 pegs. It's done all the same way. And then when you get back to your marked for border, you purl them. You know, put something on your loom, tape, whatever you need to make sure you're doing it right, and check it often. Check your work. Turn it over and look at it and make sure. You will easily see that if you don't have these garter ridges running down both sides, you'll see a mistake very easily. Okay, so now we're going to switch to this one here. This one here, I have all the rows done on my pattern. All of these rows done with the E-wrap. I'm back to the ending border again, where I do all knit row, all purl row, just like we did at the beginning. I'm going to do one here just to help us show it. This here is the back side, but this is our border and our E-wrap middle. I could show you this side, but it's a little hard. My loom is fairly big, so it's a little hard to show you. I will in a little bit. Okay, so here, once again, we're all knit, because now we're on the ending border. So one row is going to be all knit, one row is going to be all purl. Okay, so I went ahead and knitted the whole. You won't be able to if you're making a blanket, but for this purpose. Okay, so you'll knit them off. Like I said, we're back to the garter stitch, the ending garter stitch. At this point, you have almost all your blanket done and be counting down. You'll say, I only have 8 rows to go. That's always the fun part. Always get a second wind and can get those 8 rows done in a hurry. Okay, so the first one is all knit and the second one is all purl. So you'll skip the first one and then you'll purl every one back, just like you did at the beginning. Okay, I think you understand that. E-wrap makes a beautiful, nice blanket. Very easy, like I said. But the border just gives it a nice frame, prevents it from curling. It makes it look like a finished project and not just as a practice piece. I don't personally like to see any curling in my knitting. It's just, it looks unfinished to me. And yet, I also do not want to have to crochet borders any more than I need to, because I really don't like mixing the two crafts very much, but I've done it. Okay, so now this last piece, this piece is completely done. We've done our beginning border, our side borders, our E-wrap middle, and the ending. Here's the ending rows. And so now it's time to bind off. And I'm going to show you how to do that as well in this video. I have other videos you can check too. So you're all done. You've done everything. So now you need to just wrap this yarn. It would be around your entire loom. If this loom was full of stitches for a blanket, I would take this yarn the whole way around the loom. It's going to be whatever the length of your project is. So say you're working on a scarf. Maybe you're making this as a scarf, but you would make it a little wider. But you could use the border to keep it from curling. Just take this around the loops or pegs that you're using about 2.5 times. So I'm just taking it. You know, it doesn't have to be exact. That's 2, and let's say go back here to here, that's 1/2. I'm not left-handed. What was my thinking? Okay. So now, if you have one, try to have one of these clover bent tip needles. They are the best needle for doing bind-offs. Especially, you know, you're having to take your needle up this groove, and the bent it just rolls right up there so much easier. Okay, and you want to thread your needle. This is also excellent. That eye's big. It's easy to thread. I always lay my yarn around it like this and squeeze it, and then just put the head of the needle, or the eye in the needle, I should say. Okay, now you're that far. Now, the next step is we need to do something with the turning pegs. The turning peg, take the first one off, lay it on the second peg, snug it up, and then take the bottom loop over the top. So now we're going to be getting rid of these turning pegs. Same thing over here. Lift it up, put it on this peg, and bind it, or knit it off, I mean. Okay, now in order to do bind off, you don't really have to lay this in front. On a lot of my bind off videos, I tell you to lay it in front, but once you're going to take this up through the second one, and it's automatically going to lay in front of the first one. So the first thing I need to do is take your yarn needle up through the second peg with a loop on it. And see how that makes 2 loops here on the first one. So now take your yarn needle and go down through both of those loops. Don't catch your stitch marker. You will have to watch out for it, or you'll be snipping it out. And pull your yarn. Also, if you're working on a blanket, this needle yarn here is going to be very, very long. You can check that on some of my other bind off videos. You have to use 2 hands to pull it gently so that it does not get knotted. Okay, so now your yarn's here, there's a little hump right here, if you can see that on the video, and that's where you brought your yarn down. You'll skip this peg and go to this peg. Bring it up through. That creates the 2 loops here. You'll always be going down 2 loops. So you're going to put your needle down through the 2 loops. Make sure all your yarn stays in front of your pegs. Snug it up. You know, you can pull pretty tightly. It's only going to go so far, and it'll sort of stretch back. Skip this one here and go up this one. Okay. Snug it and go down through the 2 loops. Just like that. You're going to create 2 loops here, and what that's doing is matching the 2 loops here on your cast on, so that your bind off and your cast on is going to look the same. Again, if your yarn's here, you just went down here, you skip this one and go up this one. And then down through. You know, I suggest this needle, but you can use any needle you want to use, whatever you're comfortable with. Use both hands. Make sure you keep your yarns into the front. It's sort of just like up and down like sewing. It's basically you're sewing the end of your blanket. And that's what's going to keep it from unraveling when you take it off. It can't get much easier than that. Don't remove any loops. I can't tell you that enough. Do not remove any loops until you're all the way around. Just do not. That's how you get off even edges. One end will be real wide, one end will be real narrow or U-shaped. I've done it. And once I found this way of binding off, it's the only way I do it. It works every time for me. On one of my bind off videos, I left one of the yarns accidentally go to the back of a peg. It really didn't harm it. It was no harm, and it worked out okay. But try to keep them into the front of the looms. It looks the best. It keeps your edge the nicest. If you stop in the middle of the work or get called away, I like to just put my needle up through like that and then let it. And when I come back, I know that this is the peg I'm on and that's the direction I'm going because of the needle. So you bring it up through the end one and to the back, and then just trim it 6-8 inches so that you can weave that in. Okay, now on most of my blanket videos, I'm going to tell you to remove every other loop first, and I'm just going to do that even though this is a sample piece. I do that because the weight of this, if it was a huge blanket, can pull a lot if you start taking off one. So I like to do this first. Take off every other one first. Okay, then when you come back through, make sure that your blanket is a lot of it in your lap where it's not like hanging or pulling from the loom, and then continue to take the rest off. And you won't have as many to take off because you only have to take off every other one. So hold on to that blanket. These may look loose and floppy right now. I'll show you what to do in a minute. But just go ahead and remove the rest of them. Okay, what I like to do here on this end where I just pull it snug a little bit, and then I run this through my hands. like that. I sort of stretch it. I shape your corner. You just shape your corner up. Lay your piece out. When I'm done in Afghan, I will lay it on a flat surface, a clean floor, a bed, an ironing board if that's all you have. And I like to just smooth it out in different directions and give it a little tug here and there. That helps to lock in all your stitches. There you go. This is an E-wrap middle. And here's your nice border all the way around. It looks the same here as it does here. And your E-wrap middle is just easy and you don't have to think a lot about it. It's just an excellent way. And it really is not that hard. You just need to keep track of what row you're on, like with your patterns, what row you're on, and especially if you're knitting or purling. If there's a certain way that you can purl better, then maybe instead of starting and going this way to cast on, maybe you start here and cast on this way. That's perfectly fine. That will work on for you as well. It doesn't matter which way you go. Just want to be able to purl the way you can purl the best. Now, if you ever look at some of my patterns, there's purls going both ways. There's knits and purls both ways. So you have to really look at, if you're going to get into making blankets, make sure you can knit and purl in both directions. It's best to start with like a scarf, even if it's just a small scarf or a sample piece, even like this, and just practice being able to knit and purl in both directions. Okay, that's about it. I hope you learned how to apply the garter stitch to your next project, whether it be a scarf, a washcloth, or a towel, or a table runner, blanket, shawl. Hopefully this helps you. Check out my other videos and subscribe if you can. Thank you very much. Have a great day.